Welcome to Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. BuzzFeed, Lyft, Google, Meta, Whole Foods, and Deloitte all recently announced layoffs affecting thousands of American workers. They join a growing list of companies cutting back on their workforce this year amid concerns about economic uncertainty, as well as the need to right size their going on a hiring spree during the pandemic. According to the US job report, US employers added just 236,000 jobs in March, well below expectations, and also a sign that the Federal Reserve's year long rate hike campaign to cool inflation is now also cooling the labor market. My guest this week is Allison Hemming, founder of The Hired Gun, a digital and tech recruiting firm in New York. She's also author of the book Work It and creator of Pink Slip Parties, a get together and networking event with fellow laid off employees to swap career advice, commiserate, and meet with recruiters. Welcome to Feminism Today. How can companies and CEOs make these difficult moments better for their employees? Is there a company playbook to follow?
I strongly believe is coming at a potential layoff with transparency in advance of when you think it might happen. In other cycles, the history of layoffs has always been, let's keep it quiet, let's keep it in leadership only, and we'll do the layoff all at once and we won't tell the workers. In today's modern world, everything is out there, right? Like, we all have access to the same news, we all have access to the same social media. Your employees know what's going on, and they might be able to help you prevent having to have such a big layoff if you can get them involved earlier, right? So in some cases, some companies are employees are working together to say, hey, if we take salary cuts or don't take raises this year, can we save some people's jobs, right? So if you can approach your potential layoff or the moment of retrenchment that your company might be in partnership with your employees, you might make it to the other side with a stronger company. I think that talent today knows that, especially after a year of layoffs, that the boom cycle of being able to get a job just by putting your resume out there is over for the moment, and reality is set in. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to work to help solve the problem.
Right. So now that we've squared away the role of the firm in what we see as the sort of increasing layoffs, what is your advice for people facing layoffs? Just basic advice.
So there's two moments, right? What I say is the moment before the layoff happens, and then as the layoff happens, and then really three, and the time period right thereafter. So if you feel that your company is in trouble and maybe they've already had a layoff, it doesn't mean that that's the last layoff. So getting to work and getting your job hunting materials together is really important. The mistake most candidates make is they start with the resume first, and I firmly believe that you should start two ways. One, you want to really start thinking about where you want to go next. What company and what sector are you most interested in moving to? What companies will you be able to easily translate your experience and your current playbook to? That matters a lot, especially if you don't get let's say you don't get a huge severance package or a package at all. So you need to be able to get into the market right away and get a job, because you have to pay your rent, you have to pay for your kids' education, all of these things, right? Food. And so now that moment is, even though people want it to be a moment of self-reflection, and a moment to sort of think about, am I doing the right thing right at this very moment? It's actually the fastest thing that you can do in order to start earning income again is to try to get a job that is really similar to your last job, right? However, that doesn't mean it needs to be in tech. It can be in another industry outside of tech. You can take your tech skills and translate them to an industry that is doing quite well right now, like healthcare. And so that moment of thinking through that should be happening before your layoff happens. Then there's the moment of I need to get serious, right? And most candidates move immediately to rewriting their resume, which, if you ask anybody, rewriting the resume always gets greeted with a shrug and a sigh. It's terrible. It's hard. And I'm a firm believer in update your LinkedIn profile first. That is home base. As a recruiter, the first thing that every company does when we send a resume over is they look at a candidate's LinkedIn profile. We know that. So at my company, we include the LinkedIn profile every time because we know that's their first step. Companies look there, hiring managers look there even before they open your resume. So put the effort on the LinkedIn profile and updating that. And again, if you want to modernize it and you haven't been looking for a job because you've liked your company, a good technique is to look at your competitive set, meaning who is in the jobs on LinkedIn that you most want to get next, right? Take a look at the individuals in your peer set or competitive set and see what and how they're showcasing their skills. This isn't meant to be where you exactly copy it, but you will get great ideas. And again, time is of the essence, especially if you need to get a job right away. So that's number one. Number two, if it's in the moment and you have lost your job, don't sign anything right away. That is super important. You want to reflect on the package that they're offering and the healthcare package. Maybe they've extended you, let's say, 2 months of additional healthcare. You might be able to negotiate that. It might be a moment, depending on your level, to bring in a employment attorney to look at what they're offering. Most employers have what I would call a little reserve fund for the squeaky wheel, right? So if you come back and you negotiate and you say, here's why I feel that the work I've done has been valuable. I've been at the company for a long time. This is going to be a hardship. Can you extend my healthcare from 2 months to 6 months or 6 months to a year? You might be able to get some extra money into your package in a variety of different ways, whether it's severance or whether it's additional healthcare. So that's part two. Don't go it alone in that moment. And then part three is, right, and I'll explain this in a second, is partner up with the people that you got laid off with. This, it is so lonely when you first get laid off, but you don't have to go it alone. You can really bring in your colleagues who are facing the same things and turn them into job hunt buddies and help them. You get to help them and you'll benefit in ways that you can't even imagine, but they can help you in things like critiquing your LinkedIn profile, critiquing your interviewing style. If you haven't been on Zoom for a while, even though you're in meetings all day with them at the office, it could be a great way to sort of stay in touch with people and practice those job interviews over Zoom so that you can get through this tough period on your, not on your own.
Let's talk a little bit about your now infamous pink slip parties, which I think this is where you're leading to. I read that when the dot-com bubble burst back in 2000, you were one of the many laid off employees. At the time, you planned this get together and networking event with fellow laid off employees, and this was sort of the genesis of this initiative. What is the pink slip party?
So at the time, it's funny, the what happened when is a little different. So I was working at a media company and we did have a layoff and the whole company shut down, right? So the extreme layoff when the company goes out of business. And there was a period of time there when I was looking for work and hadn't started the hired guns yet, and was just getting my company going. The hired guns were a digital and tech recruiting firm. And I started to see these little signs of layoffs happening. And, again, it was very similar to now where the economy was robust. There were more jobs than there were candidates. You could, if you wanted to change your job, it was available to you. And so I decided to put together an event. Some of my friends were getting laid off too. And we would meet every Wednesday in New York City's Chelsea area. I found this great bar owner who would let us meet there. And so for the first year, it was every Wednesday, and then it went monthly, and then it went quarterly. So it lasted for about 4 or 5 years. We would have these get-togethers, and the whole idea was people would show up. If you had lost your job, you could come. If you had a job to offer, you would come and network with people. And if you were just a colleague and somebody who was there to support your friend, you could be there too. So people were pink slipped, wore pink glow bracelets. People who were there to support friends wore blue ones, and people with jobs, of course, wore green. So there were no name tags. We kept it really fun and chill. I like to think of it as the first ever open source party. But before that, right, when you would get laid off or when somebody would get laid off, they would go home and be alone. And the cool thing about tech and working in tech and digital was that we'd always sort of tried to do new things in new and different ways and change the narrative around what being laid off meant. And I felt very sure that other people were out there like me. And sure enough, they not only happened in New York, they started to happen all over around the country and all around the world. And they still do. In 2008, when the mortgage crisis happened, a Wall Street pink slip party happened because the format is so easy. And that's something that I feel very strongly about in today, right? You don't have to wait for me to throw you a pink slip party. You could throw a pink slip party with your colleagues, your friends, get together once a month, once a week, whatever is going to suit you, because your work colleagues are your people. And if you mix people in, right, people with jobs, people who, who are there to support you, it doesn't always have to be, a bummer. It can be aspirational. You could be thinking about the future in ways that you might not even expect. And just sort of the act of being out and about really does create a nice elixir for making new and fresh starts.
I mean, it seems to me, it just calls to mind this saying I used to hear, they're not doing it to you, they're doing it for you to grow. So the layoff was happening for you to grow, and grow you did. Hired Guns has done some phenomenal work in terms of supporting the next generation of leaders in the tech space. I want to talk a little bit about the Women's Bureau champions policies and standards that safeguard interests of working women, advocates for the equality and economic security of women and their families, and also promoting quality work environments. Does your work at all intersect with some of these themes?
We're at a place where we can help coach companies on not only best practices, and we the work that we do every day to help influence those best practices is something that everybody on our team really cares deeply about. It's why they come and work at the Hired Guns, and why talent wants to come back and work with us, because we're representing not only their best interest in at the negotiation table and finding like the right opportunity, but how they're going to succeed inside the opportunity, right? So at our company, since I started 23 years ago, I've been a firm believer that the construct of full-time and freelance is sort of made up in our minds, right? Like, inside the, not inside our minds, but inside corporate structures as they have always been. And we have always pushed the envelope there. So, sometimes with, in the moment we're in, right, we have situations where a company will be, they'll say, oh, we were going to hire that person, we were going to hire for this role, but now we can't because we have a headcount freeze. And we're set up to be able to put people into both consulting opportunities and full-time opportunities. So, and in the two previous recessions, what was really interesting was that the talent that we worked with, was very open to saying, right now I'm open to full time, but if you need me as a consultant, I'll change the way I'm working. So a lot of the coaching that we end up doing with our candidates is around gearing them up for those transitions back and forth between full time and freelance.
Sounds to me that a recruiting firm or some sort of headhunter is required for the marketplace. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, no, I think we're a part of the marketplace, but we're not the only part, right?
Okay.
And I believe that as an individual who's a job seeker, you can, again, you can absolutely manage your own career in terms of reaching out to employers, reaching out through networking in order to create the opportunities that you want inside the companies that most interest you.
Okay.
One of the things that's super interesting right now, again, uh, you know, the I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's the new salary transparency
Yep. In
in
New York,
New York and California.
California.
So, we as a company, we always publish now, doesn't matter what state the job is in, because we feel that we need to be able to show that. So let me get back to your question there for a second, though. Relative to salary transparency, one of the things that's really interesting that I think is beginning to play out, and again, there's no studies yet, it's my hunch, but I think that there's a number of companies that are recruiting, that are not publishing their jobs anywhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that they don't have to, put the announcement out. And why? And that's interesting, right? But it's also interesting if you're a candidate, right? And I've been saying this for years, which is don't assume that all jobs are on the job boards.
Yeah.
Assume instead that some boss somewhere, probably at a company that you want to go to, might not like the person that's on the team.
Yeah.
Maybe they're ready for a change. So
Right.
the things that you can do as a candidate are start researching the companies that excite you the most on one hand, right? And then the companies also where you think you can have the biggest impact, right? Where
Mhm.
your work is something that they need,
Yeah.
and that you would be an easy transference into that organization.
Yeah.
But what I often see in these moments, in recessions, which I don't think we're there yet, but we're definitely experiencing layoffs, there is a paralysis that happens. And I feel strongly that women can do the research and do the heavy lifting and start to, navigate and look for the places where they might be able to find their own home, right? Don't wait for it to appear, because by the time it appears, suddenly now you've got tons of competition.
Yeah.
And that's where if you do your research and then network, you have a much better shot of getting in line first. And maybe you even get the job before it's even available. Kind of like real estate, right? Like we just went through there's no homes available. But how did that person down the street get that house?
Is there any value in reaching out for cold connections on LinkedIn, for example?
First things first, see if you have like a second degree connection. It takes a little bit more legwork, but also once you've built your list of target companies, you would be amazed at how many people that might know people at those companies, right? So it's not just LinkedIn, it's also church, it's also school, it's also, could be a club that you're in as a mom, but within working motherhood, right? We're in school, we're in church, we're in, nonprofits, helping to volunteer our time with any extra time that we have. And so oftentimes it's, when you sit down and you talk to somebody and you say, hey, can we go out for coffee later? I'm looking for a new job. Be specific, right? Most people are hesitant to be specific. I would like to go work at, hospital X in our town, right? Um, and and I'm really, I'm a data analyst. I think I could be really good there for these three reasons. Right now, the person on the other side of the coffee might say, I don't know anybody at that hospital, but I know somebody at the hospital in the next town. Let me make an introduction for you. And so you have to open up the connection point with the individual. And so if you can do it in person, that is best of all, especially, within your home network. Aside from that, being able to utilize and work with your former references and former colleagues. Again, back to job hunting with your fellow pink slippers, right, who got laid off from your company. There's only, there's not really only one job for each person, right, in this moment. But everybody's probably interviewing at multiple jobs. So their job that they say no to could also be your job, right? So keeping that elasticity open is key, but also going to your colleagues and saying, I think I would be really good at this company or these types of companies for this reason doing X. What do you think? Right? You're not asking them for a hookup, but you're getting them to think about why you'd be great. And they might come back to you and say, I think you'd be really good, but not that job, this job, because they know you and they're helping you to pivot a little bit. And sometimes it's just that little tiny pivot that can make all the difference in how a company sees you when you do reach out to them. And then once you've done that, doing the cold outreach gets a little bit easier, right? But if you do cold outreach, you want to be specific, right? Which is, hey, I just left this company doing this. I did see on your website that you have this job available. I think I'd be a really good fit because the challenges I'm solving for are really similar, I believe, to what you guys are experiencing. Do you have any advice for how I might be able to get in outside of the typical job application process through the job board? And you'd be surprised how often things light up for you if you do that. But really specific subject line, really specific body copy in the body of the email. And as somebody who gets thousands of emails every year, I can assure you that the competition for writing a really compelling email is very small. So if you go hard against being, writing differentiated emails that take into account the other person, the person who's receiving your email, and start with empathy for what they're experiencing, because they might be getting additional emails from other job hunters, you would be surprised how much your email can stand out if you're super specific.
Love that advice, and hopefully it falls on someone who is in need. Let's talk a little bit about your book, Work It. In chapter
Mhm.
1, you write about several topics, but you write about two topics that I really want to see if you could lean into a little bit. The first is lose the entitlement. And the second is diversity or die. And this one is really important, I think, because especially given the fact that the unemployment rate is below 5% across demographics. However, the share of the labor force that is unemployed by race and ethnicity is really uneven. Um,
Very.
and,
Also
the,
uneven in tech,
in
right?
tech, absolutely.
Okay. Right. I have some stats in a minute that I'll share with you on that. I think that your audience will find really interesting.
Yeah, but I
But
just saw some data published on the U.S. Labor website, the Bureau of Labor website, showing that unemployment is around 4.7% for Blacks, 4.5% for Hispanics, and 3.1% for whites, and 2.8% for Asians. Can you talk a little bit about why you wrote about diversity or die, and also this idea of losing the entitlement? How does that hinder progress for both the employer and also the prospective employee?
let me start with lose the entitlement, right? Again, when I wrote the book, it was, a different time, but also recession. And or a moment of recession or early recession where people had been coming out of a flush job market. They weren't ready for change, right? And I feel very strongly that if in the moments that we're in, right, if you want to gain employment quickly, find a job that you're going to love, you have to sort of take stock of the moment, right? And the moment is shifting. If you do nothing to change, there'll be a lot more of you not who do not have who who are going to go longer without a job, right? But if you start to change and you pay attention to the moment and meet the moment where it is, as opposed to being angry that you have to actually look for a job, and it's not fair that employers are laying off for the first time in 3 years, that disposition is not going to get you to what you ultimately need and want, which is getting ahead in your career and getting additional income, maybe through your new job. So to me, losing the entitlement is very much about that. You have to have a conversation with yourself, maybe your girlfriends, maybe your husband, maybe your kids, whoever your people are, that you can get real with them on, and then push through that. You're going to be in a much better spot. And then divert. So I actually think in my book it was diversify or die, but I actually think diversity is a really interesting way to put it in the right now, right? Because what's really interesting about the right now is that companies have a moment to really think about what they're committed to, right? So during the entire pandemic and all, the crazy economy that we had, and all these jobs that got added, every single conversation that I had with an employer, the first thing everybody would say is, do you guys do diversity recruiting? And our answer is always, we start at diversity recruiting, right? It's part of our framework, whether you want it or not. So in this moment of layoffs, right, companies have got to pull that strategy into how they're managing their workforces, right? And if they don't, they're going to wake up on the other side, and all the hard work that they did in D&I will be for naught, and they'll be back at the beginning, or even worse, because if they didn't do the right thing when the going got tough, when the market rebounds again, employees will remember that. That company might not be a company you really want to work with. Right. So, and we see that sometimes with advertising, right? We just saw that with the whole Bud Light brouhaha, where the marketing team that came up with, the transgender individual that showcased their brand, and lots of upheaval in terms of people being upset by that. And the brand had a moment to decide, right, what are we standing for? Are we standing for equality or not? And they fired the team. And that's a moment that I think employees will remember.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for sharing this incredible story and inspiring a new generation of workers.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that's it for our program today. Thank you so much for watching Feminism Today on Free Speech TV. Join us again next week.